Sorry? Well, we need some kind of data that we can do create, read, update, and delete on. But your enthusiasm for class is duly noted. Okay, so I'll just create one question here. I want maybe 3 or 4 choices, and then you can vote in a second. Suggestions? What do you want to build? Okay, so it's just going to be one table in the database where we're doing create, read, update, and delete. So we could do some kind of product list. Okay, so that'd be one choice. Okay, we could do a beer store. Any other suggestions? What we should build? Okay. We could list book titles. Any other suggestions? We're going to be working with this data for like the next 2 to 3 months. Okay, well, we could do a very simple version of Blackboard. We basically have to pick one table in Blackboard. So like students or grades or courses. Yeah, okay, we could do cars. Okay, all right, so now go back into lesson 4. And down at the bottom, whoops, sorry, I just have to make it available. Just give me a second, you'll need to refresh. Okay, so click the what are we building link, and majority will win.
Awesome. Good work for it.
Okay. Okay. Okay, we seem to have a pretty clear winner. So what we'll build is a little book website, our own little mini Amazon, where we can add, edit, view, delete books. Okay, so next week, when we start working with MongoDB, we're going to set up a place in that database to store books. And we'll figure out, you know, what properties of a book we want to set up, and we'll work with that kind of moving forward. So let's add. We're going to actually add, so for books, because we're going to have a whole bunch of pages, we're going to need a page to list the books. We're going to need a page to add a new book, page for editing, delete link. We're going to want to create a separate controller for books, a separate root file. Okay. And then we'll set up maybe a book's homepage where on that main page, we'll list all the books in there. So let's make a new root file. And then we'll set up our application to use it. So we'll click on Roots, right-click and choose New JavaScript file. And let's make a books.js. So we get a blank file. We need about 5 or 6 lines in here. We're going to need to use Express, so we'll set that up first. We'll require Express. Generally, we should probably use let. If you want to use var, that's up to you. I'm going to use let where I can. If you want to use var, that's fine. So we're instantiating an instance of the express router class. So now we want to set up a get handler for our kind of our books homepage. So we'll use .get, and there's our root. And in here, we'll call res.render. Now, we typically won't want all of the views in one folder, because again, that folder is going to get massive. We're going to put all of the views that are related to the books in a subfolder. So in here, we'll call books/index. So we'll have two files called index.ejs, one in the root that's our home page, and then another one inside of the books subfolder. That's the main page of the books area of the website. At the bottom of the other routers that the generator creates, if we go and look, same line. So the first two lines are the same, the last line's the same. So now inside of views, we're going to need to create a books subfolder, and we're going to want to create an index.ejs file in there. And then we need to wire up our controller is not linked into our app.js, so we're going to have to add a reference to it in there. We're almost done. We don't have a lot more to do with this, except for one other piece. Any questions about what's going on in this file? Does it make sense based on what we've done so far? So inside of views, let's make a new folder called books. So now I have a subfolder. And then inside of my views and books, I want to make an EJS view called index. So typically by convention, the homepage or default file inside of any directory will be called index. So I'm making a new EJS file here. And here I'll just put on a title of books. So we've now got a books controller that will load the books homepage. And we want this to run at the URL localhost 3000/books. Well, let's try it out. So in my all I did was put in this H1. Everything else is just the standard HTML template here. So if I go to localhost 3000/books, I got 404. Why did we get 404? This is what we did with our register login, right? We just created the views, we created the root handler, and those views load. Why are we getting 404 here? Yeah, what do we have to do in app.js? We need 2 lines of code in app.js. Right, so one is, by default, it automatically links to the index and the user's router. If we add our own router or controller, we need to reference them here. We'll create a variable called books. That is a reference to our books controller or books router. So now our application is aware of that file, knows it exists. So the exact same code that it generator automatically gave us for index and users. So we've added this. What else do we need to do? One more step. So we need to say app.use. So what should the path be? Right, so we want any request that starts with the URL /books should be handled by the books router or books controller. Handle all requests at /books with books router. So this is how we divide up our application. Again, if we're building Blackboard, we'll have a student's controller, a instructor's controller, a courses controller, and we'll map each URL to a different controller. And that controller will handle all the logic for that part of the application. So now that we have these lines, we should be able to hit localhost 3000 /books and get our books homepage. Now our application is set up, app.js is set up to use this controller. This controller understands that URL, and that URL will load this view. So we've got these three components working together. It's all very modular. So in app.js, I added this line right at the top, line 11, and line 29. For your lab and your portfolio, you don't have to create another controller. You can do all the root handling in index.js if you want. That's fine. Not required to create another controller. So we're almost there. There's one more thing I want to do today. I want to add a little navigation bar to this with links to our 4 pages so we can move around. And then we can share that navigation on all our views. I don't know if that smile's a good thing or a bad thing.
I thought you were going to say the last thing you got to do today was give everyone here 20 bucks. But yeah, that kind of broke my heart a little bit.
Yeah. Sometimes life's a disappointment, Joel. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to make a shared header, and then we want to embed that header on our views. So inside of my views, I'm going to make one more subfolder. And typically when we have shared files, the convention is to put that in a subfolder called partials. You'll want to do this for both your lab and for your assignment. So I have a partials. So partial meaning it's part of a view. It's not an entire web page. It's a piece. And inside of partials, I'm going to create a new EJS file, which I'll call header. This is just going to be the top of our page, so we should remove some of the HTML. Which HTML should we remove? Well, I'm going to keep all of this in here, but I want to remove this stuff. That can go in our footer later. So we'll delete that. And in here, let's create a little navigation bar. We can add Bootstrap in a minute to style it if we have time. I'll add a nav. And let's add So our first link just goes to slash. And it'll say COMP2068 bookstore. But notice we don't specify the views, we specify the URLs we're mapping to. And the controller then loads the appropriate view. Our second goes to slash books. Our third link will be our register link. Our fourth will be our login link. So we want this same navigation bar to appear at the top of all four of our pages. So we're going to take out that whole HTML section and replace it on our four views. And if we have time, Preet, we'll come back to your question about the title. We may not get to it till next week. So there's no style on this. It's not going to look very good, but we should have four functioning links. So now we're going to need to open up our other four EJS files and replace the HTML at the top with a link to our header instead. So then if we want to make changes, we can just go into the header and change them here. We don't have to change each page again. So let's go to our index.ejs, our first view. We're going to get rid of all this because that stuff now lives in the header. I'll delete it. So to link it, we just use the function include. This has to be inside those EJS server tags. So now our home page is using our header. To check if it loads, we can go to our browser and try to load the localhost 3000 root and see if our header actually shows up with our four links. Let's see. So now we've got our four links at the top, and all of them load. So we just want to copy that first line to our three other pages. And we'll replace the HTML at the top. Grab it. We'll take out everything, including the opening body. We'll do it twice more. Our books should get the same. Once we do that, whoops, I think I'll have to fix my path. Works for register login. My path to books is wrong because we're inside of a book subfolder. I'm going to try it this way. Let's see if that works. Maybe I need 2 slashes to get out. Yeah. So inside of books, we have to go up 1 level to get out of the books folder. So we have 2 dots here. All the other files, they're going to work with 1. So we're starting to have the makings of a little website here. Let's also deal with those tags at the bottom. Why don't we make a footer and embed the footer on all our views and make that a shared footer? So inside of partials, we can make another EJS file, call it footer. Let's take out all that stuff. And in here, let's put in something that we might typically see at the bottom. So there's our footer. Let's now embed our footer on those 4 pages the same way. So now all the pages are starting to use that same template, same header, same footer. This is just the HTML version that'll generate a copyright symbol. All our pages now have the header and footer. So we can move around. Doesn't really matter what HTML you put in your footer, so long as the last 2 tags are close body, close HTML.
What colors do you use?
Where? Here?
In which one?
Just the default. I believe it's the default. So now if we want to modify that header, we can just open up header.ejs. So we've created this little multi-page site now. We can navigate around, we can map the URL, we can handle the URLs and load different views depending on the URL request users are making to us. Now, a couple things we're going to do. Notice we did lose the page title. So when I navigate around, it doesn't show the page title here. Because our title section, that's now part of our header. So we're going to need to make that value a variable and make sure on every page that uses the header, we're passing in a value for title. We'll do that next week. The other thing we'll want to do with this next week is we're going to want to add Bootstrap, and we can format this as a simple navigation bar. Won't take us long, but I think we'll start next week's class by doing that. So it actually look like a proper nav bar where the links extend across the page, and we can format the footer a little better too. So we'll start class next week by making this stuff look better. Okay. So I'm going to give you your lab now. It's on Blackboard. Here's what I want you to do for the lab. I want you to make a brand new site using the Express generator. Call it Lab 4. Okay. what you'll do is you'll make a new EJS file for each person in your immediate family, so parent siblings. If you're from a really big family, just pick a few siblings. If you're from a really small family, use your pet dog, your pet goldfish, whatever. Okay. You're going to make a header that's shared, and each link will be the name of someone in your family. Okay. And then you're going to create a separate EJS file. When I click on the name of that person, you just need to write a sentence or two about that person. Okay. What they do, what their job is, where they live, what their favorite hobby is. Okay. You don't need to create different controllers. You can map all of the different URLs right in index.js. So I'll show you an example of what this might look like. I think I built the sample. I just have to make sure it's here. Lab 4. Okay, good. Okay, so it should look something like this. Okay, so here's the site. This is your lab, right? So there's my brother, there's my dad, there's my mom. There's your 2.5%. Okay, so I want an EJS view for each person in the family and a shared header with a link with each person's name. I click on it, loads the appropriate view. Okay, so use the generator to set it up. Put in the 4 or 5 root handlers in index.js and make an EJS file for each person. We didn't have time to deploy it today, so leave that requirement out. You don't need to put it up on Heroku or Azure. We'll do that next week. So all I want you to do is submit the lab, create a private Git repository, upload your stuff to Git. You can exclude node modules if you want. Just submit the link to the repository on Blackboard and invite me. Yes, I'll have a look. I will put all the code we did today up on GitHub shortly, but we should clear out of here. There is another class coming in. So Scott, I'll look, but I have to look quickly.